It started with a map. I was at a yard sale rummaging through a box of old books when I found it. A faded, yellowed map with frayed edges and strange, looping handwriting. The name caught my eye. Glenwick. It was a town I'd never heard of, and considering my penchant for exploring obscure places, I was intrigued. When I asked the old woman running the sale about the map, she went stiff. Her smile faded, and she seemed to shrink in on herself. "Glenwick's not a place for outsiders," she said quietly, almost a whisper. "Best you put that map back and forget about it." But that only made me more curious. After some prodding, she reluctantly told me where I could find the town. It was about 3 hours from where I lived, hidden deep in the woods. She insisted it was best left alone, that nothing good ever came from going there. I should have listened. Instead, I packed up my car the next weekend and made the trip out. The drive was pleasant at first, all sunshine and rolling hills, but the closer I got, the more the landscape seemed to change. The trees grew denser, their branches twisted and gnarled. The air became heavy, oppressive, and a fog began to settle in, thick and white, swallowing up the road ahead. I missed the turnoff twice before I finally spotted the narrow dirt road that led to Glenwick. It was barely more than a gap in the trees, and as I drove down it, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The trees closed in around me, blocking out the sunlight, and the fog grew thicker, clinging to the car like a living thing. Finally, after what felt like hours, the road opened up, and I found myself in Glenwick. The town was small, just a cluster of old, weathered buildings around a single main street. The houses were old, Victorian style, with peeling paint and sagging porches. It looked like the kind of place that time forgot, where nothing had changed in decades. There were no cars, no signs of modern life, just the quiet creak of wood and the rustle of the wind. As I parked my car and stepped out, the first thing I noticed was the silence. It was complete, oppressive, the kind that makes your ears ring. There was no sound of birds, no distant hum of traffic, just silence. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay, and a chill ran down my spine despite the warm day. Then I saw them, the townspeople. They were standing in doorways, peeking out from behind curtains, watching me with eyes that seemed too wide, too bright. Their clothes were old-fashioned, like something out of a history book, and their faces were pale, almost waxy. They didn't smile, didn't wave, just watched in eerie silence. Unnerved but determined, I made my way to what looked like a general store. The sign above the door was faded and cracked, but I could still make out the name, Willard's Goods. I pushed open the door, and the little bell above it jangled, the sound loud in the stillness. The inside of the store was dimly lit, the shelves lined with dusty jars and old tins. Behind the counter stood a man, tall and thin, with gray hair slicked back from a sharp, gaunt face. His eyes were the same, too wide, too bright. "Afternoon," he said, his voice raspy and low. "What brings you to Glenwick?" I hesitated, suddenly unsure of myself. "Just passing through, thought I'd take a look around." He stared at me for a long moment, and I had the unsettling feeling that he could see right through me. Finally, he nodded. "Well, you're here now. Just be sure to follow the rules." "Rules?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached under the counter and pulled out a small, worn booklet, handing it to me. The cover was plain, with just one word printed on it: Rules. "Everything you need to know is in there," he said, his voice grave. "And remember, follow them no matter what." I took the booklet, thanked him, and left the store, the weight of his words hanging over me. As I stepped back onto the street, I could feel the eyes of the townspeople on me again, their gazes heavy, expectant. I opened the booklet and began to read. The rules were simple, but strange. 1. Always greet your neighbors with a smile. 2. Do not stay outside after dark. 3. Never, under any circumstances, enter the forest. 4. The church bell rings at midnight. Do not leave your home until it stops. 5. If you hear someone calling your name, do not respond. The list went on, each rule more bizarre than the last. My unease grew with every word, but I couldn't shake the feeling that these rules were important. vital even. I stuffed the booklet into my pocket, trying to dismiss the growing dread in my chest. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I wandered the streets, but there wasn't much to see. The townspeople avoided me, going about their business with a quiet efficiency. I tried to ask a few of them about the rules, but they only gave me the same answer. Follow them and you'll be fine. As the sun began to set, the town seemed to grow colder, the shadows longer and darker. I decided it was time to leave, but when I reached my car, the engine wouldn't start. I tried again and again, but it was no use. The car was dead. Panic began to set in. I didn't want to be stuck in Glenwick overnight, not after everything I'd seen and read. I thought about the second rule, do not stay outside after dark, and a cold sweat broke out on my skin. I remembered a small inn I'd passed earlier and made my way there, the last light of day fading fast. The woman at the front desk greeted me with a forced smile, her eyes the same unnaturally bright as the others. "You'll be staying the night?" she asked, though it wasn't really a question. "I guess so," I replied, trying to keep the unease out of my voice. She handed me a key and gave me a room number. "Make sure to lock your door, and don't forget the rules." I nodded, taking the key with trembling hands. The room was small and sparse, just a bed and a dresser, but it was clean. The window looked out over the street, now empty and shrouded in darkness. I closed the curtains and locked the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The minutes ticked by, each one slower than the last. The town was eerily quiet, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. I kept glancing at the booklet, the rules echoing in my mind. Then, just as the clock struck midnight, the church bell began to ring. The sound was deep, resonant, vibrating through the walls of the room. It was louder than any bell I'd ever heard, almost deafening. I clamped my hands over my ears, trying to block out the sound, but it was useless. The bell rang 12 times, and then there was silence. I waited, my breath caught in my throat, listening for something, anything, but the town was deathly still. Suddenly I heard it. A voice, soft and sweet, calling my name from outside the window. "Michael." I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. The voice was familiar, impossibly so. It sounded like my mother's voice, the one I hadn't heard since she passed away years ago. But it couldn't be her. It had to be a trick, something the town was doing. I remembered the 5th rule. If you hear someone calling your name, do not respond. "Michael, come outside." The voice was closer now, right outside the window. My hands shook as I gripped the bedpost, willing myself not to move, not to answer. The voice called again, more insistent this time, a hint of desperation in its tone. "Michael, please." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block it out, but the voice was relentless, each call driving a spike of fear deeper into my chest. It was like the voice was inside my head, pulling at my thoughts, trying to drag me out into the darkness. "Michael." And then, as suddenly as it had started, the voice stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It was thick and heavy, pressing down on me like a weight. I didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe. I just sat there, curled up on the bed, waiting for something, anything to happen. The hours crawled by, each one longer than the last. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The rules kept running through my mind over and over again until I thought I'd go mad. Finally, the first light of dawn crept through the curtains. The town began to stir, the oppressive silence lifting just a little. I gathered my things, my hands still shaking, and headed downstairs. The woman at the front desk was gone, replaced by a man with the same too wide, too bright eyes. "Leaving so soon?" he asked, his voice polite but devoid of warmth. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just passing through." He nodded, handing me back my car keys. "Drive safe, and remember, don't come back." I didn't need to be told twice. I got into my car, and this time the engine roared to life on the first try. I drove out of Glenwick as fast as I could, not daring to look back. It wasn't until I was miles away that I finally felt like I could breathe again. The fog had lifted, the trees were thinning out, and the sun was shining through the leaves. But the unease remained, a cold knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I've never gone back to Glennock. I've never even tried to find it again, though part of me wonders if I could. The map I found disappeared from my glove compartment, and every attempt to locate the town online has come up empty. It's like it never existed, but I know it did. I can still feel its grip on me, the weight of those strange, impossible rules, the memory of that voice calling my name. Glennock is out there somewhere waiting for the next unfortunate soul to stumble upon it. And if you ever do, follow the rules. Your life might depend on it.